All right. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is a Common Rule podcast. Yes, I know it's been a minute. I know that I haven't been podcasting on this channel for very long or for a long time, but it's still here. It's active. They're still charging me. I still get a monthly bill for the channel to get it done. Yeah, so don't you fret about nothings, all right? Don't you fret about nothings. One of the, it's great to be back. It's great to be talking about creative. And that's, I guess, one of the ruts about having a podcast about creating and workflow and making art and learning and how to make art is that when you're in a sort of lull, you get in a rut, you get into a slump, and it's one of the things to where you gotta, oh man, I don't want to talk about baseball right now, but it's what it is. My Padres didn't make it this year to the World Series, which is pissed off. However, rest in peace, Fernando Valenzuela, even though he was a Padre as well, number 34. I actually have a podcast on how Fernando Valenzuela changed my life in a few episodes back. Hell, it was probably about 5 years ago, I think, at this point. But it's Fernando Valenzuela was, and I guess still is, a very important part to my life. I know it's very difficult to say, hey man, me and my buddy, we have an ongoing joke where Dave Grohl talks about any fucking band he ever talks about, and one of the things is like, man, that fucking band changed my life, man. And it's just an ongoing joke. Anything from, I don't know, from ABBA to Robert Johnson to whatever, anything Little Richard, anything he's ever listened to, it fucking changed his life, man. And, it's up to him. Well, whatever. It's probably true. It isn't true. I don't know. I don't care. But it seems like everything that they talk about, he fucking changed his life. Well, when I tell you that Fernando Valenzuela changed my life, it is by no means an exaggeration. It's not a hyperbole. It is indeed a fact of life. I wouldn't be here talking to you or having any sort of, I think, creative flow, creative juices, or anything like that if it wasn't for Fernando Valenzuela. And I know it's kind of hard to connect the dots, but I won't go into that too much on this one, only because hey, it's going to take up too much time. It's been a while since I podcasted again, and I'm just going to talk about some things that I'm going to and that I'm working on, I don't know, sort of getting out of a rut, getting out of a slump. Pete Rose also, goddamn, I forgot. Yeah, Pete Rose has passed a few weeks ago as well. Shit. May you rest in peace. Man, well, you shouldn't have bet on baseball, but I hope you somehow get an honorable mention in the Hall of Fame. I'm one of those guys that thinks that as long as Shoeless Joe Jackson isn't in the Hall of Fame, I can't allow Pete Rose to be in there before Shoeless Joe. Hey, string me up or light me up if you want and you see me in person. That's how I personally feel. But that doesn't take away the fact that Pete Rose is one of the best baseball players ever. He too has passed away, and there's when he talks about what you do to be in a slump, he says you only do a couple of things. You either move back in the box, you move front of the box, you move towards the plate, you move behind the plate, you move towards the plate, you move away from the plate, you choke up on the bat, and you choke down on the bat, but you don't change your swing. And I think that's something that's applicable very much so to, I think, anybody that had some sort of creative juices or anything like that. And I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, it's weird how there's a couple other things that have happened here. A couple of people aren't with us anymore that I find very ominous, if you will. But life goes on, and so do we. You guys remember that show, Empty Nest, back in the 80s? It was after Golden Girls. That was a good show, too. Anyway, I finally cleaned my house. and it's somewhat presentable now. My house was such a mess that it looked like I just moved in. And now everything, and I recorded myself. I created content for it. And I'll tell you why in a little second here. I put the camera on a tripod and had me basically do the whole thing. And it was about 3 hours worth of cleaning and moving shit around to get organized. And I'm not even done yet. That was part one. The other part I'm going to talk about here in a second, but I do have to set up my scanning / digitizing setup for my film photography. It's really crazy how there's things upon things that in order to get to this thing, you have to move 2 other things. And it's just kind of like Tetris and moving and chess all at the same time and preparing and doing all that jazz. Well, whatever. The thing that I do have to do that I noticed is my accumulation of gear. Some useless, some nostalgic, some near and dear to me, and some just needs to get thrown out or given way to somebody that can probably use it. And so what I have to do is, along with what I did just now, is I have to take my own advice and go back to one of my own podcasts where I talk about taking inventory of the stuff that you have in order to really organize and prepare yourself. And one of the things that I used to do back in those days when I was making those podcasts, when I was making those episodes, is I have this notebook. I ended up buying this big old notebook. It's actually a sketchbook, which I really like. It's hardcover. It's for artists. It's not lined or anything, which is what I liked. All my scribbles are just all over the place. But they're just blank pages, and I used to jot down all my ideas on this and work off of this to make the episodes. And it worked like a charm. But then I got away from it. I started getting a little cocky, and I started getting more and more disorganized and more off the cuff, which is fine. I actually didn't mind that at all. I don't think that it's a necessary process that had to happen. And also, I had more conversations with other artists as well, which was pretty cool. Most of my conversations were more or less off the cuff. I don't regret doing that, to be honest with you. It's a process. So now I have to take inventory and just really organize my stuff, my video stuff, my photography stuff, because I'm really starting to change the way that I think about doing stuff. All right. I'm really want to focus on something. And as far as, let's just call it, and I hate the word, and again, it's a joke that my friend and I have. I hate the word content, and I hate the word content in Spanish, and I hate the word content in English, because content to me is like, it doesn't mean artistic. It doesn't mean that it's creative. It doesn't mean that it's valuable input. To me, in my head, content is just something that you go out and make to fill a void, and not something that you put a whole lot of thought and effort into. So that's why I hate the word content. There's another word that some video creators use, and they're called assets in order to do some things. And I hate that word too, because it's not, in the creative space, in the artistic space, I just don't like these words that are very mechanical and not, don't seem to fit into the creative workflow that I have for my head and for anything. I just can't think of things like that. And I don't even like the word how they sound. Content, it's fucking whatever it is, whatever, So the issue with it, on the other side of the coin, is that I realize that everything you make can't be good. And this is where I kind of come in now, where I'm finally getting back to taking pictures on a more regular basis. I'm going out on photo walks. And I decided to do something that one of the kids are doing, that I see some of the kids do. is they go on the photo walk and they film it. They film themselves doing it. Some are good, some are bad. But some of them have different ways in which they talk about the photographs that they made. And some of them have a more like a no narrative, no narration. Sorry, there's a narrative obviously on your photo walk if you have intent in going out and make photographs and however you want to make them, but there's no narration. It's just sort of like a soundscape. Some of the sound is really good. And they show you, like, they would stand, for instance, I'm watching in the background something, as far as one of them, as a matter of fact, where they would go into a cityscape and they show you, okay, this is the entire scene. And as a photographer, this is what I chose to make a photograph. And it's very interesting, and I like it. The thing is that I look at these videos too, and I'm looking at, like, man, these videos get 10,000, 5,000, 100,000, a million views. And I just look at them and it's like, man, it's good. Someone's out, some of them are well edited. Some of them are not. The one that I'm looking at right now is crafted very, very well. It's both video work and, I follow this guy. His name is Ill Concept, ILLKONCEPT on YouTube. And he is a photographer. I believe he shoots both film and digital. But he has a very nice way of composing and looking at the world, both in video work and through photography. I think it's very cool how he does it. But how that applied, I mean, I don't want to steal anyone's vibe or anyone's style, but the way that I do it. Oh, and the other example that I wanted to talk about, as far as there's a couple Japanese photographers or videographers that all they do is they just have a little, like, action cam clipped on them somewhere, or they're holding it in their hand and they walk through the streets and through the neighborhood and just let the sound and the city and everything come to them as they walk through whatever part of town they happen to be in Japan. And most of these are in Japan. And the other guy that I really like is, I believe, Inuga Travels. He just takes trains everywhere. And he has zero narration. It's all written in English or in Japanese. What happens on his train ride, what you do, how to go here, how to go there. And it's all it is you're absorbing the sounds from the train and the people around him. And I think those are very, very cool as well. And there's another Japanese guy that I'll talk about that one. He does documentary sort of work, and he follows, I think I've mentioned this before too, he follows cooking street food vendors, and again, it's all, he doesn't say anything and there's no music. It's all just the sounds of the street and the utensils and everything. I want to do something similar. And now the reason that I want to do something similar isn't necessarily because I want to bite it or anything like that. What it does is, along with my podcasting journey, is I'd like to learn how to do these things to possibly help someone else do it as well, as far as being a producer or something like that. And it's not like I'm not trying to be like them. I'm not trying to go viral, which I'll talk about in a second. I just kind of want to make decent content for myself and learn how to practice using my tools. One of the things that I just started to go back and more or less kind of archive is this documentary sort of thing that I made. Well, the documentary isn't out. What I have I have the assets. I have the footage and I have the photographs of a tour I went on with Transfer, a local San Diego band. And they went on tour to the Southwest for, I think it was a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks. I don't exactly remember. I think it was just over 2 weeks. We met a lot of people. And I finally got to know Grandpa Drew, which we spoke a couple episodes back. I had a conversation with him as well. And we all got to know each other on this tour a lot better. And as I'm looking through it, I'm archiving because I, for whatever crazy reason, I decided to go ahead and take video of this. Now, back in those days, I was very, and which is funny too, because I'm looking at YouTube, going down a rabbit hole on this. But one of the things that I wanted to be just a strict photographer. And I think that one of the guys mentioned, you know what, if you have a video camera, just bring that along just in case. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, fuck it. I'll bring it. And what's funny is and I spoke about this before, but it's worth kind of mentioning again, is that the whole reason I became a photographer is because I actually wanted to start making videos first. Of vacations and trips that we had. But I used to bring both my dad's old camera and this video camera that I bought just for making the trips. And one day I got lucky and made a great photograph that I still love to this day, even though it's kind of wah. The photograph came out so good that I'm like, man, I need to take more photographs because that's really good photograph. And to this day, it ended up being a photograph of one of my friends, which is one of the things that I need to tell you. I was talking to my nephew about, and actually one of the things that has happened in this podcast before is documenting life is very much a necessity, no matter how you do it, in my opinion. And that photograph was of my friend who is no longer with us. May he also rest in peace. Man, I'm talking about a lot of dead people today. Yikes. And it's almost Halloween, man. Easy, man. Easy. Take it easy. May he rest in peace, too, as well. And it's now the photograph is more valuable than it was when I took it. And I thought it was cool, you know. And all it is my friend and his wife standing in front of the first Starbucks in Seattle on one of our trips to Seattle, having the coffee that we just bought from there. And it's composed half-ass, but it looks cool to some extent. There's a certain aesthetic to it that I'm still to this day like, that was all right. Anyway, that's when I started to concentrate more on photography instead of video. So by the time I get to this part of my life, it's like, oh man, I'm a photographer. I'm not a videographer, blah, 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 this, that, and the other. And I ended up taking the video camera. And even though I recorded over 24 hours worth of video, I wish I've done more of it. There really is. I'm looking at this archive and I'm like, man, I should have really have taken more. There's just a lot more that happened that I know that, and don't get me wrong, I don't have FOMO, no, I'm not into that shit. It's just that, what I'm thinking is that it was some sort of balance. I took a lot of great photographs and I have to appreciate my photography. And even though I wish that I would have taken more video, I have to consider that maybe my photographs came out as very good, in my opinion, because I wasn't concentrating so much on video. And that was, I have to take that and feel comfortable with it. So, but I do, and I'm thinking about that at that time. But now I'm thinking about, man, why can't I do both? Why can't I be good at both? There's nothing wrong with that, right? So again, I have to get more comfortable with making video, but also with editing and coming up with a workflow so that making video isn't so cumbersome to myself, and I think that may happen in many aspects in our creative workflow and where a lot of people probably don't get into a lot of other things because of the learning curve and the possibility that their original talent, that their original creative flow or whatever it is that they're working on might get hindered somehow. And I am of the opinion that fuck it, man, I'm getting too old for this shit. Like fucking Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon. It's time to really learn something new. You have to get into a workflow to learn something. And this is where the content making aspect comes into it, right? I need to create something, anything, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I need to make something so that I can edit and cook it and be able to learn the craft. So all of a sudden, whether it's artistic or not, in order to learn how to properly edit and do audio and record, at one point I have to start recording garbage and hours of video. So I don't mind telling you that I have hours and hours of things that I've uploaded to YouTube that are unlisted, there's just a lot of garbage, a lot of, me with a bed head on, talking talking with a cold. Shit, the one I recorded yesterday, I was testing, I had a booger up my nose, and I didn't even know that. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. But I needed it because I was testing out the camera that I was using and testing out the audio. And I'm like, well, let me record something here and talk more shit about whatever. And I edited what ends up being 17 minutes worth of garbage. What I'm doing is taking my camera out. I got little action cameras. By the way, the DJI action cameras, if you're into action cameras, they're the best. I had a GoPro. The GoPro was garbage. I'm not here to shit on your brand, but I highly recommend the DJI action cameras. They got that pocket camera too, which is funny because today, the episode that I saw, I finally saw how the pocket camera from DJI is what the walkie-talkie guy uses to record his walk-alongs. And they're great video. He's got great audio because he does this whole thing. I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of it. But in the end, what he's doing is using minimal gear that's easy to carry. And he's not going around carrying these big old video things, which I was convinced I needed to do back in the day. And back in the day, I mean like 2 years ago, I was, oh man, I need this camera. Oh man, I need this. And what's funny is the more that I use these action cameras, these little camcorders, the little itty bitty camcorders, the more I use them, the more I'm convinced that if I had to do that music trip all over again, that tour, I would probably take a lot more on the action camera than I would on a regular camcorder. Technical things aside, they are just very easy to use and whatever. I'm not going to get into the whole technical side of it, but the smaller it gets, the easier it gets. Obviously the one of the things that I published was that the gear we have now is 1,000,000 times better than the gear they used to make Citizen Kane. The fact that Citizen Kane, as far as visually quality, I mean, it's great cinematography, or even like The Hustler, right? The Hustler, black and white film movie that has absolutely amazing cinematography. One of my favorite films, especially for the cinematography. It's a Paul Newman flick, along with a couple other actors, Piper Laurie and the dude from Patton, George C. Scott. You guys got to watch that movie. It's just an amazing story, very well told, very well shot. Anyway, the gear we have now, you can easily shoot that movie with a $200 camera, $500 used camera. The camera that I have now has more dynamic range than the film. Some cameras now have more dynamic range than the film that they use to record it. We're pretty close. Anyway, my point is that I'm taking the gear out and I'm recording. I'll give you a perfect example of what I did the past few days. And I actually really love what I'm doing. I'm like, sometimes your own shit don't stink, I forget what it's called, where there's a specific syndrome where when photographers first start out making photographs, they're in love with everything that they do, even the stuff that is absolute garbage. They totally love it. And then as they get better and better and better, they start liking less and less and less of the work that they put out because they're learning. But at some point, they get to the point where they start not liking enough of their work and probably being too hard on themselves. Even though they're making great content. And I was into that for a second, but then I was like, you know what? Fuck that. I get to the point at some places where I don't even pick out the best ones or the worst ones. I edit them all out and then I upload them. And then, hey, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I really don't care. I'm not into making a portfolio for anyone right now. Anyway. Until someone asks me, hey, let me look at your work because I'm going to hire you to do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to take weddings or quinceañeras, so you can forget about it. You guys know my thing on that, right? But no, I'd like to pay you for taking me to Marrakesh, and I want you to document the whole thing. I'm like, well, hold on a second. Let me get you this to you right here. What I'm doing is I'm experimenting with audio and these little digital cameras. The action camera, actually, if there's any wind, it's horrible audio. But if it's in a controlled space, the audio is not bad. I take separate audio on me, and I'm working on syncing here, syncing there, doing some things. But I'm taking the camera along with me to car rides or like when I go. The example was I went to a taco shop, and you can see that. I uploaded it on YouTube if you guys want to see it. Tacos Manuel here in Rosarito is absolutely delicious. I went there. I went to another taco shop that's very local on the other side of the road there. Very delicious, and those are probably, come to find out, those are probably the best tacos that I've had here in Rosarito. I haven't had them all. But today I went into I went to the taco place in my neighborhood, which is okay. But I decided to get my shoes resoled. Or sold, I guess it's resold. Put a new sole on my shoes, on my boots. And found a shoe guy. I've never taken my shoes out to get fixed, and I documented that. I don't think it's really worth it. I don't know if I published it. It might be published on my YouTube. But I'm doing all these things to where I just need the content to be able to edit and sync up and just work on the technical stuff. And slowly but surely, I'm coming to like, you know what? This might actually work. And the funny thing is that as I test the equipment and the audio in my car, the more I like the way it sounds, and the more I edit it, because sometimes, anyway, not to get too technical, because this is not what we're talking about, but I'm learning how to edit properly, especially editing my audio as it's in the car, because there's a technical thing that needs to happen so that I basically take the bass and the rumble out of it. And the more that I'm listening to it, the more I'm convincing myself that I should just start recording on the go and just start recording, not necessarily live, but recording as I drive down to, the taco place, or recording myself as I go through traffic. While I've recorded hours and hours of this, there are things that pop up that are random, that are pretty cool. And I'm like, maybe this can be a podcast too. And I'm really liking the idea. But, anyway, I've heard worse ideas. So, if you hear me podcasting from the road, you know that's one of the things that I decided to start doing, So one of the things that I started doing is going down this crazy rabbit hole of YouTube. I bet every single one of us has a rabbit hole that they go down on YouTube where you want a new piece of gear, you want a new piece of this. I'm thinking about, when I was thinking about buying my Instapot, I went down the Instapot, the YouTube rabbit hole. When I was thinking about buying, my gear or whatever, I go down the rabbit hole. And I think it's healthy, to be quite honest with you. I consumed about 40 hours of Instapot stuff before I decided to pull the trigger on it. And I have 3 of them now, and I use them at least 2 or 3 times, well, maybe 2 times a week right now. I love them. They're great. And crock pots, I love making certain things on crock pots. So I go down these rabbit holes, and I'm sure some of us do it as well, especially if we are, like gear nerds of some kind, right? Whether it's a recording, or whether it's looking for a guitar, whether it's recording something, video, audio, anything. But when I started going through camera stuff, right? And as a matter of fact, I got some guy in the background here taking street photography pictures. So I'm going down this rabbit hole of camera stuff, mostly seeing what kind of gear and stuff. And because I have big cameras that are at least 15 years old at this point, I think. And they're still great cameras, still great colors, and you can edit to wherever it is. I don't need a new DSLR or anything, but I like to carry something and take more professional video out there. So there's a smaller version called Micro Four Thirds, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm going down this rabbit hole, And it turns out that a lot of these people like to use these smaller cameras for street photography. So I'm like, all right, let's go down and go down this rabbit hole. And, I come across this, the Walkie Talkie channel. And what it is, it's this guy that goes around street photographers of New York and LA trying to create relative content, relevant content. And at some point, I think yearning to go viral for something or anything, which I guess is fair. I mean, to obtain some kind of notoriety for something you've created should be a good thing, right? The problem is that sometimes we go viral for something shitty. But I think that if you, and I'll talk about this, if you keep striving to go viral, that's something. Well, here's the thing. I'm looking at these guys. And I have to I have to mention two channels that I went down the rabbit hole here with. There's one called Elephant Graveyard. And this channel, I think, is amazing. And I think it's relevant because what it's doing, it has all these imageries, these videos, these layers in the videos. We're like, man, I'd love to do that. It's something I definitely want to do. Or it's very experimental. Experimental is a shitty way to describe it, I think, but it's very artistic. And it's a great use of AI to create these awesome videos. And it's fucking hilarious. The one that stood out, and it's the newest one, again, it's called Elephant Graveyard. You need to watch one. The one with Neil deGrasse Tyson on it. And I'm not going to give you the whole thing because I think it's worth watching. But it's basically Neil deGrasse Tyson is pitching a show to producers. And it's just beautifully done. And it's done with AI. I mean, I'm convinced it's AI. I doubt that Neil deGrasse Tyson went on the Elephant Graveyard and started pitching his show. But it's just amazing. It really is. They got all these videos layered on top. It's a podcast in and of itself, but the way that they layered the video makes it a great YouTube experience. Again, worth the watch. Visually stimulating, if you will, as well as sonically. The other channel that I found is called Walkie Talkie. It's a photographer that goes around big cities mostly, and he's in LA every once in a while, and he's gone to a couple small towns that I believe, but he mostly hangs out in New York and LA, and he's talking to photographers as they walk around and, make photographs and videos of the world. I love this show for a couple of reasons. One, I've received I've had a few ideas and of things that I want to do out there in the wild. And I've received confirmation that, it might be a good idea to do that. I think it's very cool. And I've since kind of started doing a little bit of it or some sort of knockoff version of what they're doing. The other thing is that they've also found inspirations for other ideas. I like that the show, what it does is it pretty much has a lot of different point of views, because that's exactly what street photography is. If a bunch of people go down the same sidewalk, everyone's going to take a photograph of something completely different, right? But what the show does for me, it actually shows me a small window into my past as a young know-it-all who took himself too seriously about his craft and basically a lack of talent. I see these like cool, hip young cats doing their thing. And, I sometimes look at the screen and I yell at it, "Hey man, it ain't that serious." It's kind of weird to see them trying to categorize themselves and find some sort of a niche, right? A couple of photographers even were talking about like, how do you get found? How do you become relevant? And they keep talking about a niche, and it's in creating some sort of niche. They're casting out a net for possible viralism. Viralism, is that a word? I don't know. We're making it a word now. But I think it's making it more difficult if you're trying to find a niche. I think, ironically, what it does is it makes it difficult to be yourself and be unique. Instead of trying to see the world as you see it, you're seeing the world as how others might like it. And it really gets to the point, like, let's just say, all of a sudden, the world really liked your photograph of a windshield wiper. So what are you going to do? Are you going to always make photographs of windshield wipers from here on out, to make a collection of windshield wipers, or do something like that? I mean, that sounds ridiculous, of course. But at some point, you might get locked in so much that you start forget about the other things that you see. And that's one of the things that I've never really got into, to where I think I think I'm a decent portrait photographer, but I've never once ever described myself as. Sometimes I wouldn't even describe myself as a photographer, but just to say that I'm a portrait photographer, because I can do a couple of things. I tell you what, I know that I suck at a lot of things. Like, again, my landscape photography is not ideal. I don't really do street photography at all. And this is one of the things that as I walked around and started talking about, is like, and I did a little short that I uploaded, to where this fisherman, as I walked down the boardwalk here in TJ, which is under construction. The boardwalk does not look like that. I should have mentioned that in my video. It's under construction. They're not going to leave the boardwalk being dirt and no railings. Please. It's under construction. It's going to look beautiful by the time they're done with it, hopefully by next summer. But I encountered a couple of different people in that whole thing that I just, if I was a street photographer, when I look at this walkie-talkie show, some photographers are very engaging. They go, "Hey, how you doing, man? Take your photograph, this, that, and the other." Others are just kind of assholes. Like Bruce Gilden is one of the photographers that some of these kids are a little too into. And what Bruce Gilden did, and what you probably, you say PC for lack of a better term, Bruce Gilden used to just walk the streets with a camera in one hand and a flash in the other one, and they used to stick both of them very close to people's faces, take a picture, and walk away, and be very aggressive doing things like that. You can't really do that nowadays. People will either punch you or say, "What are you doing?" and might ask you to quote unquote erase the picture now that it's all on digital, right? And so they're I think taking too much away from that. I could never do that. And I'm not into, "Hey man, let me take your picture." Every once in a while, someone will ask me to make their photograph on the street and then send it to them. There was a time, I remember this one guy. Let me tell you about my life right now. I remember this one guy. I forget his name. And then, you know what? I think it was George, as a matter of fact. And I'll tell you if I remember correctly. So George, fuck it, let's just say it was George, saw me, and this was back when, this must have been 2012. This was the end of summer into the fall of 2012. And I was going to go into Mexico and make my documentary of a little small town in Mexico called Paracho, where they make guitars. And I was going to spend a few months there and make this documentary. And I was on my way down there, and I had car trouble. To make a super long story even longer, to make a long story short, I had car trouble. And I stayed in Tombstone for a weekend because my brother and friends, we couldn't quite get together as far as when somebody could come down and help me out. We ended up buying like a trailer to put my car in because that was the cheapest way to get the car from Tombstone back to Phoenix, where I was staying at the time. And so I stayed in Tombstone for a weekend. So what did I do? I just started walking around making photographs and quote unquote landscapes and using HDR and used stuff that's out of my element altogether, and working on different crafts and this, that, and the other. I made some interesting photographs, and some people actually bought them. But this guy, I was in a bar making photographs, and this guy asked me out of the blue, "Hey, would you mind taking a picture of me and my wife?" I'm like, "Yeah, but I didn't have a way to send it to you." I said, "I can email it to you, but it'll be next week." He's like, "Oh, no, I don't want email. I don't do emails." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, no, let me, he's like, "I want you to mail it to me. I want you to print it up and mail it to me, and I can, but, I just want it." He wants a physical, yeah, he's an older gentleman. So I'm like, "Well, hell, give me your address, and it'll take a couple of weeks. By the time I got back and got my shit together and this, that, and the other, right?" He's like, "Yeah, no problem. I'm not in a big rush for it. Let me give you my address." And he's all, "How much is it going to be?" I'm like, "Man, just give me a couple beers and we'll sit here and talk." And yeah, that's what I charged him. He bought me more than a couple beers and some shots. I mean, we had a good time. But yeah, it was interesting. It was very cool. And that's how I was able to make a portrait of this man and his wife there in the bar. So I'm not that kind of person where I ask people on the street to, let me take your picture sort of thing. Unless I'm drunk, then I don't give a fuck. And some of you know, I keep telling people, I'll tell you, when I'm drunk, I may not be the best photographer in the world, but when I'm drunk, I'm telling you, I'm top five in the world. Anyway, so these guys are out there. They're making content. They're doing a couple of things that I agree with, and they're doing some other things that I absolutely do not. But again, they are all trying to create something, and some of them are great photographers. Don't get me wrong. Everyone has some sort of talent. The guy whose channel it is, he picks real good photographers. They go out and they make photography, and they just start talking about their philosophy, why they take pictures, what's their favorite picture, just kind of simple routine questions. And they talk about more or less, what's beautiful is that they talk about, they're really passionate about their city, their town, their neighborhood. And that's the beautiful part of it all, is that you really got to love where you're at, or got to have a passion for. And this is something that I always tell people. The camera is just a tool. You already have to have a passion for something. It doesn't matter what it is. Photography isn't the thing. It's what you're passionate about. And these people are passionate about their city and their town, and they want to document it. And that's what it is. There's some sort of rite of passage that they think they need to go through by making, I wouldn't say cliche images, because that's not really a thing that I'm worried about. It's like they're concentrating too much on maybe what's not important. Here's the thing, though. The more that I am here yelling at the screen, "Hey, you're being like an old geezer yelling fucking old man," I realize that I'm here and they're there. They're outside in the proverbial wild, creating and connecting. And I think that at some level must be part of the idea of the package, right? That it's connecting is probably the base of creation at some point to really at one point be able to communicate with a bunch of people. And if that's not the point, it might be worth the time to just find out. It must be worth the time to go out there in the wild, working on something, anything, creating good, the bad, and the ugly, instead of yelling at the screen and saying shit like, "No, that's not it at all." And, because, in a minute there is time, sort of shit. It's not that serious. And although it may not be the only thing to create It sure is fun and could be enlightening, and one never knows where all these kids are going after this. I mean, that Bruce Gilden guy, he's still out there making photographs. And what's funny, and maybe even a bit ironic, is that all these people that he has inspired along the way have, in a weird way, actually not even in that weird way, have actually taken a piece of his pie as far as making money. He's on record now saying that he can't make money doing what he does. He can't make a living doing what he does compared to how he was 20 and 30 years ago. I think he even said 15 years ago. There's too many people out there doing it, and there's too many people out there saturating the market. He's a little more aggressive with what he says, like, oh, there's a lot of shitty photographers out there doing what he does, and in a weird way, it's his fault, which I think is kind of funny. Some of the things that he does and how he does it, there's a couple other people doing it. There's this guy in LA that is he doesn't carry a flash to blind people as he takes pictures of them. He won't ask to make a photograph, and he'll just stick the camera right in their face. And he's got a really cool story about one guy who saw him coming, had a hot, nice loogie waiting for him, and he spat at him. But much to the dude's chagrin, he actually got a great shot of him being spat at. But he was out there in the wild doing it. I'm not sure. I guess that's connecting in the literal sense, where if somebody spits at you, that's part of him is now part of you in some sense. I don't know if that's the great way to doing it, or if it means finding your niche or whatever. But again, at least he's out there. And that's something that I'm definitely need to apply to myself and make this quote unquote shitty content in order to, at the very least, get a workflow going. My coffee's ready. And get the workflow going to just be able to, I think at one point, be able to not necessarily streamline, because again, that's a word that tells me that there's banks on the river and that you have to go down a specific path of the river, let's fucking flood the whole thing, But you still have to go out there and make this shitty content in order to practice and be able to really work on the creative stuff and not be bogged down by the business end of the artistic process, I guess is what I want to say. Anyway, I rambled on enough for this one. Thanks for listening. I do know that I need to make more of these things. If you follow me on social media, you're going to see all the links to all the crap I make anyway. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Go out there in the wild, do something, whether you're dancing on a pole or whether you are shooting somebody dancing on a pole. Photography, guys, photography. Go out there and do your thing. Take it easy and enjoy your youth.